Chapter 1304. In the dark hall of the Gate of Heaven, the 9 generals had entered Jun Wushan's palace to train. In the entire Gate of Heaven, only Jun Wushan's palace had the densest chi of vitality. Usually, only the 9 generals who had made some contributions were allowed to enter to train. Now that all 9 of them had entered, it was obvious that Jun Wushan was preparing for them to stabilize their strength before the battle. It would be even better if they could make a breakthrough. However, when everyone else was making the best use of their time to train, Xue Wuli was hiding in a corner, secretly contacting Chu Xiu. Now that Chu Xiu was ready to attack the Gate of Heaven, he naturally had to use Xue Wuli as a nail. When Chu Xiu had contacted him just now, Xue Wuli's face had turned ashen. Fortunately, the thing that Chu Xiu had planted in his mind seemed to be extraordinary, so it had not been detected by the formation in the hall. How is the Gate of Heaven now? Has Jun Wushan come out? Chu Xiu's voice rang in Xue Wuli's mind. Previously, Chu Xiu had asked Xue Wuli in the upper world, so his primordial spirit power had been greatly depleted. Now that they were in the lower world, the distance had been shortened so much. Chu Xiu's primordial spirit power could support him to ask more questions. Xue Wuli answered truthfully, Jun Wushan has come out, but I am not sure if he has recovered from his injuries. However, Jun Wushan does not seem to panic. He is ready to give up the outer defense and fight us directly in the Gate of Heaven. And the 9 generals have all entered Jun Wushan's palace to train. They want to seek a breakthrough in the last period of time. Do you understand the formation inside the Gate of Heaven? Xue Wuli shook his head and said, I know nothing about formations. Only Zhu Tianxiao, who specializes in formations, understands. All right, you continue to lurk in the Gate of Heaven and look for opportunities to act. When the Gate of Heaven is destroyed, you will be the hall master of the Holy Church. With that, Chu Xiu cut off the connection with Xue Wuli. Xue Wuli looked around and lowered his head. His eyes were filled with viciousness. Don't blame him for being a traitor of the Elysium. In fact, Xue Wuli himself did not have any loyalty to the Elysium. In the heavenly gates, other than the 5th Qi Song, who was second only to the Gate Master, and Lin Songlong, who had been completely brainwashed, most people did not have any feelings for the heavenly gates. The 9 great divine generals also frequently fought amongst themselves. After all, during the divine general ranking, they would really try to kill each other. There was nothing to be said about the strength and battle prowess of the warriors that were nurtured by the heavenly gates. However, their cohesiveness was too weak. A month later, at the foot of East Kunlun Mountain, Chu Xiu had gathered the elites of his Kunlun devil cult. At the same time, other sects in the Jianghu were also arriving. The Celestial Master Manor, the Moon-worshipping cult, the Forgetting Sword Hut, the Shangshuaying clan, and so on. There were also cultivators from the 3 nations and the outer seas. From bottom to top, there were close to 100,000 people of all sizes. With the current strength of the 3 nations, it was possible to gather 100,000 soldiers. However, this was 100,000 warriors. They were not ordinary warriors who had only tempered their muscles for a few days and knew some external martial arts. They were all warriors above the Khanate realm and had mastered Gang Qi. In ordinary fights between Jianghu people, a few hundred or 1,000 people would be considered a lot. At this time 100,000 people were here. Even if they were placed in front of the towering Kunlun Mountain, it would still be an exceptionally spectacular sight. However, because these 100,000 people belonged to hundreds of sects, they seemed a bit messy, especially when compared to the neat ranks of the Kunlun devil cult. Chu Xiu stood at the front. Yi Xiaonan, the old celestial master, being family patriarch, and the others were all the same. Yi Xiaonan looked at the peak of the mountain and frowned. Where are they? Chu Xiu knew what Yi Xiaonan meant. What he was asking was that they had all gathered at the foot of Heaven's Gate, but they still hadn't seen anyone from Heaven's Gate. Chu Xiu said, There is no powerful formation around Heaven's Gate. Jun Wushan can't stop us here. There is a powerful formation at the entrance of Heaven's Gate. Everyone go up the mountain. In the eastern and western heavens, Zhong Shenqiu's Mahasvara has never participated in the disputes of Jianghu. However, his Heaven's Gate is above the entire Jianghu. What we have to do now is to pull down this Heaven's Gate from the sky. Chu Xiu's words were changed with the power of rules. It stirred up a breeze and easily rang in the ears of all the warriors present. Those martial artists who came from ordinary sects, after listening to this, even felt a surge of emotions. After all, this was Heaven's Gate, one of the eastern and western heavens. It was a legendary existence. Now they were going to attack Heaven's Gate. This made them feel like they were witnessing history. The leaders of the other large sects looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. How did he know about the Heaven's Gate plan? It seemed that Chu Xiu's plan for Heaven's Gate was deeper than they had imagined. It was definitely not something he had prepared on a whim. At this time, at the peak of Heaven's Gate, the fifth Qi Song controlled the formation and opened the door of the Heaven's Gate secret realm. Groups of warriors walked out from it. Compared to the 9 divine generals, the warriors in the Heaven's Gate secret realm were not as glamorous. Instead, they looked like beggars. However, they all had a strong murderous aura on them. It was as if they had just walked out of a battlefield. Moreover, these people were very strong. The weakest of them had reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man. There were also many warriors who had reached the true fire spiritual cultivation realm and could compete for the 9 divine generals. They looked at the scene in Heaven's Gate with longing in their eyes. They had only seen this scene once. That was when they were brought to Heaven's Gate. After that, they were locked in the secret realm. They lived in it, cultivated in it, and fought in it. Unless they could stand out among the divine generals and become one of the 9 divine generals, they could only stay in there for the rest of their lives. Looking at the thousands of warriors in front of him, Jun Wuxian said in a low voice, "The Kunlun devil cult's Chu Xiu has united the entire pugilistic world to attack Heaven's Gate. Fifth Qi Song has already told you about this. Heaven's Gate is not afraid of challenges. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei was not able to destroy Heaven's Gate. 500 years later, Chu Xiu is still unable to do it. In today's battle, I have released all of you. I am also giving you a chance. There are only 9 divine generals in Heaven's Gate. This cannot be changed. But now, I can choose 18 candidates for divine generals. Other than the fact that you do not have your own palace, you can still move freely in Heaven's Gate. You will also have the chance to enter the pugilistic world. These 18 people will be the 18 people who have performed the best in this battle." Hearing this, the eyes of the Heaven's Gate warriors seemed to be burning. There was only murderous intent and fighting spirit. They had stayed in Heaven's Gate mystery land all their lives, so they only knew that only by becoming divine generals could they step out of the mystery land and obtain freedom. They did not know who Chu Xiu was, nor did they know how strong the entire pugilistic world was. They only knew that killing people would give them freedom. These warriors in Heaven's Gate mystery land did not need to say much. A few words were enough to arouse their fighting spirit and murderous intent. At this time, Jun Wuxian turned around and asked Zhu Tianxiao, "Is the spell formation ready?" Zhu Tianxiao nodded and said, "It's ready. But Master, most of the spell formation in Heaven's Gate was left behind 10,000 years ago. Even though it has been maintained in the past, it is inevitable that there will be a certain degree of damage. Moreover, the defensive ability is somewhat insufficient. If there is a problem, only I can control it personally. So I need someone to protect me. First, to prevent sneak attacks. Second, to help me replenish my inner energy in time, and maintain the spell formation in case of an emergency." Jun Wuxian nodded and looked at the other 9 divine generals. "Who is willing to go?" Before the others could speak, Xue Wuli rushed to say, I am willing to go." Everyone present looked at Xue Wuli with disdain. They thought that he had jumped out to protect Zhu Tianxiao, because he didn't want to be at the forefront of the battle. Although the divine generals of Heaven's Gate did not get along with each other, they still despised such cowardly actions. Jun Wuxian did not react. He only waved his hand and said, "Then I'll leave it to you. Protect Zhu Tianxiao." Turning around, Jun Wuxian said in a low voice to the others, "Follow me and fight." At the peak of Kunlun, in front of the Heaven's Gate, the entire Heaven's Gate was covered in pure white snow. However, one could still vaguely see the gate's buildings, which had the style of the ancient age. When Chu Xiu and the others ascended the Heaven's Gate, the Ying family patriarch and the others also looked at the Heaven's Gate curiously. In the past, the Heaven's Gate had been extremely mysterious. Therefore, no one had been able to ascend the Heaven's Gate to see what was inside. Today, when they actually ascended the Heaven's Gate, they realized that the so-called Heaven's Gate was actually not that mysterious. It seemed very ancient, as if it had existed for tens of thousands of years. It was like an ancient relic. Looking into the Heaven's Gate, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. He said loudly, "Jun Wushen, so many guests have come to the Heaven's Gate. As the host, aren't you going to welcome them?" Chu Xiu's voice did not seem loud, but it resounded throughout the entire peak of Kunlun. It even caused a sizable avalanche. In front of the Heaven's Gate, a faint blue light bloomed. Jun Wushen led the 7 divine generals behind him, as well as the groups of Heaven's Gate warriors, out and stood at the border of the battle. Looking coldly at Chu Xiu, Jun Wushen's voice was as cold as the ice on the peak of Kunlun. "Chu Xiu, back then, I should have killed you at all costs. You were lucky that the 7 arrows didn't kill you. This time you actually dared to come and seek your own death. Do you want to be buried in Kunlun?" Before Chu Xiu could reply, everyone present looked at the group of people behind Jun Wushen, and their expressions changed. They even felt some lingering fear and trepidation. They had thought that the Heaven's Gate was very strong, but they had not expected it to be this strong. Chapter 1305. Previously, most people in Jianghu had always thought that Elysium was a hidden sect with few members. Therefore, even though the Elysium divine generals had done many outrageous things in Jianghu, no one had bothered to do anything because they didn't want to provoke these strong people. But now that they had seen so many powerful warriors in Elysium, they were a little scared. Once these people were brought to Jianghu, who could stop them? Everyone present couldn't help but look at Chu Xiu. It was estimated that only the Kunlun devil cult could stop Elysium. Chu Xiu looked at Jun Wushen, and the corners of his mouth suddenly pulled into a smile, a mocking smile. "Jun Wushen, you have always pretended to be very calm and very tough. In fact, you are just a person who bullies the weak and fears the strong. You didn't kill me back then because you didn't want to? That was because you couldn't kill me. You were afraid of Zhong Xinxiu. You thought that Zhong Xinxiu was protecting me because of karma, so you didn't dare to touch me. It wasn't easy for you to hide in the dark and use the head-piercing 7 arrows to plot against me. In the end, I dodged it and you were seriously injured by the arrangement left by Dugu Weiwei. Jun Wushen, you think highly of yourself, but in fact you are no match for Zhong Xinxiu, and even less than Dugu Weiwei. Now are your injuries better?" Hearing Chu Xiu's words, the expression on Jun Wushen's face changed slightly. Regarding his injury, Jun Wushen didn't suspect that there was a traitor in Elysium. He thought that Chu Xiu was talking about the last time he was seriously injured by the mark left by Dugu Weiwei. "Even if I'm not better, I can still kill you." Jun Wushen turned his gaze to old Taoist master Yi Xiaonan and the others and said coldly, "Do you also want to join forces with Chu Xiu to seek death? For 10,000 years, Elysium has rarely interfered in Jianghu affairs. Just based on Chu Xiu's nonsense, are you prepared to die?" Without waiting for the old celestial master and the others to reply, Chu Xiu said, "Jun Wushen, you think too highly of yourself. Is attacking the divine gate equivalent to seeking death? For so many years, your Elysium rarely interfered with the affairs of the martial world, but every time you made a move, you broke the rules of the entire martial world. Besides, you don't have to waste your breath. Sect leader Yi and the old celestial master aren't idiots. Since they're already here, do you think they'll retreat? Rather than letting you take revenge on me later, I might as well kill you first." Apart from the martial arts practitioners from small sects and clans, such as the old celestial master and the others, who had been persuaded by Chu Xiu to prepare to take action, were actually already prepared to fight to the death with the divine gate. The others could retreat halfway, but they could not, because they were too big of a target. If the Heaven Gate wanted to settle the score in the future, then they would basically not be able to escape. Therefore, since they had already decided to take action, even if this path was wrong, they could only go all the way. Jun Wushen looked around, and a hint of cold murderous intent flashed in his eyes. It was colder than the 10,000 years of ice on the summit of Kunlun. "Since you want to be buried on the summit of Kunlun, then fine, I will fulfill your wish. As soon as Jun Wuxian's voice fell, Zhu Tianxiao, who was in the middle of setting up the spirit array, quickly manipulated the spirit array. In an instant, the spirit array's blue radiance flickered and expanded to thousands of feet, enveloping everyone present. In the formation, Chu Xiu and the others were almost unaffected, but the martial artists below the real pellet state felt a cold chill eroding the meridians in their bodies, freezing their internal energy, and even their movements began to slow down. At the same time, when the Elysium martial artists rushed out, the faint blue light merged into their bodies, causing their aura to soar. This scene made Chu Xiu's expression change slightly. He did not expect that the Elysium's first move would be beyond his imagination. In the information that Xue Wuli gave to Chu Xiu, there was no description of the Elysium's formation. After all, Xue Wuli was not proficient in this, and the Elysium's formation was mainly built by the ancient powerhouses. In the past 10,000 years, except for the time 500 years ago, the Elysium had never been broken, so there was no record of the effectiveness of the formation. All those below the real pellet state withdraw from Kunlun. Chu Xiu's voice resounded in the crowd, and the entire team lost 90% of its people in an instant. With this formation, it was useless to let these martial artists come up. They would only die. At the same time, Jun Wuxian also moved. At this time, Jun Wuxian's injury from the formation hadn't recovered yet, but the power of his attack was still amazing. In an instant, an intense explosion sounded in midair. Jun Wuxian's body was like a falling meteor, streaking across the sky to appear in front of Chu Xiu and the others in an instant, his fists smashing down. This punch was like a meteorite. The powerful power shook the void, and even the snow floating in the air froze at that moment. Chu Xiu's pupils immediately shrunk. Jun Wuxian's injuries had yet to fully heal. Thus, the cultivation that he had revealed should only be between the 4th and 5th heavenly layer of martial immortal. His cultivation should be around that of the Bliss Demon Palace's Yan Beifeng, whom Chu Xiu had fought before. But the problem was that power was power, and combat power was combat power. After all, Jun Wuxian was once in existence of the 7th heaven of martial immortal. His understanding of power and the use of martial arts were much better than Yan Beifeng. Chu Xiu raised the breaking formation in his hand, and boundless sharpness condensed in his hand. When the saber slashed down, the rules in front of him were torn apart, like a huge black hole, devouring all power. The devourer of the 7 limits was used. Chu Xiu almost used one of his strongest saber techniques. But before Jun Wuxian's punch, the devourer of the heavens could devour the power of rules, but it couldn't devour the extreme power. With a loud explosion, the huge black hole slashed out by the devourer of the heavens was destroyed, and Chu Xiu was sent flying. But in that instant, there were people attacking from all directions around Jun Wuxian. Chen Qingdi's true fire of inner power burned to the extreme. When the punch landed, it was like a collapsing mountain, striking Jun Wuxian's back. Wei Shiya formed hand seals, and the power of rules swept out. The snowstorm on the summit of Kunlun was grasped in his hand, fused with incomparably powerful demonic qi, and turned into an icy demonic palm, descending from the sky. Yi Xiaonan's moon blades spiraled around her, and she slashed at Jun Wuxian's left side. Wherever she passed, all the energy and power of rules were gathered together, turned into the weakest power, and dissipated, making way for the slash. The Heart Sutra of Mending the Heavens was originally an extreme demonic technique that went against the natural order. It used one's own power to forcibly distort and change the power of rules wherever it passed. It was also an extremely overbearing technique. At the same time, the Celestial Master on the right side formed hand seals, and the summit of Kunlun, which was originally shrouded in snowstorm, suddenly roared with thunder. Thunder execution. Heavenly thunder of purple clouds, heavenly thunder of the 9 heavens, and other types of thunder kept changing in the hands of the Celestial Master, forming a huge thunderstorm that smashed towards Jun Wuxian. Around them, 3 martial immortals and 1 Celestial Master, who although not a martial immortal, had already comprehended the power of rules, and was not inferior to a martial immortal attacked. The few of them cooperated very well, and in the instant that Jun Wuxian repelled Chu Xiu, they had already completed all the attacks. But in the next moment, as Jun Wushan formed hand seals, the 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionment light will behind him bloomed. The huge will looked real and illusory, and the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation revolved around it, capable of strangling all kinds of power. Chen Qingdi, who was being strangled by the 6 paths of reincarnation, was unable to withstand the power, and was sent flying. A trace of blood even seeped out of the corner of his mouth. But there was not the slightest hint of fear in his eyes, only a strong desire to fight. Yi Xiaonan's divine weapon, the crescent blade, was directly cut into several pieces by the 6 paths of reincarnation. The weapon spirit was completely killed, and it was extremely miserable. But Yi Xiaonan's eyes were shining as he looked at Jun Wushan. This was the realm and power that he had been pursuing all this time. As for Wei Shuya, he retreated again and again, cutting off his connection with the demonic hand. Otherwise, the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation would affect him. Among those present, only the old heavenly master had the most experience in battle. After throwing out a large ball of thunder, the old heavenly master dodged to the side to avoid being affected by the power. Patting his chest, the old heavenly master sighed and said, "I'm already so old, yet I still come out to fight. I'm afraid that among the generations of heavenly masters in the celestial master's abode, no one is more hard-working than me." With just one move, the attacks of the 5 were completely defeated. Jun Wushan's power was simply terrifying. However, before Jun Wushan could say anything, Chu Xiu, who had been sent flying by him, immediately used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The huge demonic body seemed to be able to support the heavens and the earth. His body pierced through the clouds, and with a punch, the powerful force shook the void and went straight for Jun Wushan. Magic! Jun Wushan's eyes revealed a trace of haze. He recognized this magic. To be more precise, if it wasn't for this magic, Chu Xiu would have been killed by his head-piercing 7 arrows a long time ago, and he wouldn't have survived until now, causing so much trouble. From Jun Wushan's point of view, the law phenomenon was a standard power-type magic. In fact, among the magic, power-type magic should be on the weaker side, because it was just pure power, and the variations were too little. However, the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth mystique had evolved the power to the extreme. When that punch landed, it was as though an ancient demon god was roaring and fighting against the heavenly Tao and all living things. Jun Wushan's hands formed a seal, and the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light destruction wheel was cast to the extreme. The huge will was raised to the top of his head, and it strangled and destroyed all the power of rules. Be it in the lower realm or the Dalu Ocean, there were very few martial skills that could go against a magic. The last move of Chu Xiu's 7 limits, the Heaven Devourer, was like this, and the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light destruction wheel was also like this. This skill was a combination of evil and magic, refining the heart, soul, and reincarnation. Finally, it turned from illusion to reality, and turned into the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel, strangling all things. When Chu Xiu's punch landed, it shook the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, and caused it to tremble, causing the entire Kunlun mountain to tremble. However, it also successfully blocked Chu Xiu's mystic power with the power of a martial technique. Chapter 1306. In the raging waves of the East Sea, Zhong Xinxiu walked on the waves. Sometimes he went east, sometimes he went south, sometimes he went north, and sometimes he went west. It was as if he was going in a circle. At this moment he suddenly turned his head to the west, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Karma has changed. The next moment, the red dot between his eyebrows bloomed with a dazzling red light. The red light actually blended into the laws of this world. If Chu Xiu was here, he would definitely be able to recognize what this was. Previously, in the central continent's city of the Wronged, Chu Xiu had seen the threads condensed from the power of the laws. And now, the power that erupted from between Zhong Xinxiu's eyebrows was actually this kind of thread. It was as if he was the embodiment of the power of the laws. The thread seeped into the laws of heaven and earth. In Zhong Xinxiu's eyes, the scenery between heaven and earth was constantly rotating. Time and space rotated freely, and all kinds of unexpected scenes appeared. In the end, he couldn't even bear it, and let out a muffled groan. With a wave of his hand, he cut off the thread formed from the power of the laws. Zhong Xinxiu looked to the west. His eyes regained their clarity, but they were filled with confusion. Karma has become chaotic? He couldn't see clearly, and he couldn't understand what was happening. Zhong Xinxiu stood in place for a long time until a passing shark treated him as food and bit him, breaking his teeth. Only then did Zhong Xinxiu seem to react. He shook his head gently and continued to circle in the East Sea. At this moment, Chu Xiu didn't know that he was being spied on by Zhong Xinxiu. Even Jun Wuxian didn't notice. Jun Wuxian had used a martial skill to forcefully block the punch of the law embodiment of heaven and earth. This kind of strength was simply shocking. But Chu Xiu's emotions didn't fluctuate in the slightest. If one punch couldn't break it, then 2 punches, 3 punches. The power of the law embodiment of heaven and earth erupted to the extreme. After 5 consecutive punches, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc finally shattered. However, the moment the 6 paths of reincarnation disc shattered, the power of rules around Jun Wuxian started to gather. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the crimson power of rules encircled Jun Wuxian's hand and transformed into a crimson dragon spear. It was so hot that even the Kunlun mountain, which was covered in frost and snow, had a scorching feeling, as though it had turned into a flaming mountain. The crimson dragon spear suddenly pierced out, as if it had pierced through space and time, and arrived in front of Chu Xiu in the blink of an eye. Stab flick. There were only 2 moves, but they displayed the essence of spear techniques to the extreme. Divine ability spear technique, fire dragon lighting the lamp. At this moment, the scorching heat enveloped Chu Xiu. The huge demon god body was sent flying by the seemingly weak dragon spear. At the same time, Chu Xiu's body was instantly set ablaze with intense flames. His inner force and true qi were being consumed crazily. The fire dragon lit the lamp, but where was the lamp? Chu Xiu himself was the lamp. The law embodiment of heaven and earth dissipated in an instant, but the flames were like maggots in the bones, still burning around Chu Xiu's body, as if they would not stop until he was burnt to ashes. Chu Xiu's heart suddenly sank. He seemed to have underestimated Jun Wuxian. To be precise, he did not understand Jun Wuxian well enough. Jun Wuxian had only attacked twice. The first time was when he was facing Zhong Xinxiu, and he had revealed his 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment brilliance wheel. After that it was used for sneak attacks and assassinations with the 7 nailing arrows. He did not even know how many magical powers Jun Wuxian had mastered, and how strong his power was. Every time he attacked, he was testing the waters, but Jun Wuxian came prepared. At this moment, Wei Shuya appeared beside Chu Xiu, and boundless demonic energy wrapped around Chu Xiu. At the same time, a trace of the power of the rootless sacred flame erupted, and only then did it expel the evil flames of the fire dragon lit the lamp. The rootless sacred flame itself was a treasure of heaven and earth formed from the power of the rules. Although Wei Shuya could only control a trace of its power, this trace of power was enough to expel the power of the rules in the fire dragon lit the lamp. At this time, Jun Wuxian was being held back by Chen Qingdi and the other 2. However, the 3 of them were also in a precarious situation. Although Chen Qingdi's physical body was strong enough, and his power was also strong enough, these 2 advantages were basically 0 in front of Jun Wuxian. Jun Wuxian didn't know what kind of secret body refining technique he had cultivated, but his physical strength was above Emperor Chen Qing's. With a casual punch, he was able to send Emperor Chen Qing flying, causing him to vomit blood and be injured. Although the old celestial master was not a martial immortal, his set of thunder was integrated with the power of the rules, and its attack power was no less than that of a martial immortal. However, Jun Wuxian just glanced at it casually, and formed a seal with his hand. It turned out to be the authentic Taoist seal of the 9 symbolic words. The 9 symbolic words in the void trembled, as if it was the sound of the Tao between heaven and earth, and it actually disintegrated in mid-air. On the other side, Yi Xiaonan's heaven-mending heart sutra was performed to the extreme, and the color of the clouds in mid-air had already changed. As he pointed, a crack appeared in the void, and it wrapped around Jun Wuxian. Wherever the crack passed, the rules of heaven and earth had been completely rewritten. Mending the sky himself, and the sky that Yi Xiaonan mended was his own sky. A strange look appeared in Jun Wushan's eyes. Among the warriors in the underworld, there are not many who can catch my eye, and you, Yi Xiaonan, are one of them. To be able to study a cultivation technique to such an extent, and its power is close to that of a magical power, even in the ancient age, there were not many who could do it. It's a pity that you chose the wrong person and walked the wrong path. As Jun Wushan's voice fell, the huge demonic shadow behind him burst out. In an instant, the demonic flame was monstrous, as if it covered the sky and the sun, covering the entire peak of Kunlun. Wherever the demonic shadow passed, it split into tens of thousands, filling the crack in the void, and finally condensing into one, rushing toward Yi Xiaonan. 10,000 demons returned to ruins. At this moment, Chu Xiu finally knew what Jun Wushan's martial arts path was. The path he took was actually the same as Chu Xiu's, incorporating the strengths of 100 schools of thought into one, and pursuing the ultimate peak of fighting. The 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionment light will had the flavor of a Buddhist cultivation technique. The 9 symbolic words were Taoist, and this 10,000 demons returned to ruins was a demonic cultivation technique. Also, his physical body was strong, and he had obviously cultivated a secret body refining technique. Moreover, he was able to survive more than 10 reincarnations in Chu Xiu's 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. His willpower and primordial spirit were also extraordinarily strong. With the combination of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic cultivation, as well as countless martial arts, his physical body and primordial spirit did not have the slightest weakness. How similar was this to Chu Xiu? Of course, there was a reason why Jun Wushan could have this kind of cultivation. The fact that he could master a magical power like the head-piercing 7 arrows in a short period of time showed how amazing his comprehension and talent was. The Elysium was left in the lower realm by the upper realm to guard the gate, so the first batch of Elysium disciples were the elite disciples of the major sections. The cultivation techniques they left behind naturally included the strengths of 100 schools of thought. With these conditions, the path that Jun Wushan was taking now was normal. At this time, Yi Xiaonan had been surrounded by countless demonic shadows, and was about to be seriously injured. Chu Xiu could no longer care about the consumption of his magical power, and immediately went to help. Apart from himself, Yi Xiaonan was the strongest here. If he was seriously injured, then his side would be in trouble. However, before Chu Xiu could make a move, Yi Xiaonan seemed to have given up on defense, and actually let those demonic shadows penetrate his body, and he was instantly torn apart. But in the next moment, everyone felt that something was wrong. Although Yi Xiaonan's body was penetrated by countless demonic shadows, there was no blood flowing out. Instead, it directly collapsed, and turned into a ground full of colorful beetles. They were densely packed, and looked somewhat horrifying. Yi Xiaonan's figure actually appeared from the other side. He looked at those beetles and frowned. The substitute goo has been completely destroyed. At this moment, everyone realized that Yi Xiaonan had actually used the goo of Miaojiang's moon-worshipping cult. In fact, in the beginning, the moon-worshipping cult was famous for its voodoo. Even now, half of the people in the moon-worshipping cult practice demonic arts, while the other half practice voodoo. Of course, most people practice both. And Yi Xiaonan had never used goo in Jianghu, because his strength was too strong. He was so strong that he could completely crush others with his strength. Why would he still use those unorthodox goo? So many people actually ignored the fact that Yi Xiaonan was the leader of moon-worshipping cult, and that his goo should be very strong. Jun Wushan was surprised for a moment, and then he sneered and said, "Miaojiang's goo is very interesting. But do you still have a goo to substitute? A goo to block a demonic shadow. Your goo will die, but my demonic shadow will not be destroyed. Now do you regret joining forces with Chu Xiu and attacking my Elysium?" Chu Xiu said faintly, "Jun Wushan, you should be the one regretting it. You, Jun Wushan, are powerful and the best in Jianghu. It's true that you, Elysium's previous leaders, are all selfish people. You left the best cultivation place for yourself and pushed your strength to the peak. But what about the other 9 godly generals? Do you think they can still block it?" Just now, when Jun Wushan was facing the siege of 5 people, although he dealt with each move according to the situation, and did not fall into a disadvantageous position, It was impossible for him to be distracted to pay attention to the movements in other places. At this time, when Chu Xiu said this, he realized that Elysium's side had begun to collapse, and it was a great defeat. When the 9 godly generals faced a single sect before, they still had a great deterrent power, but at this time, when faced with the warriors of the entire Jianghu, they could only be hung up and beaten. Even with the support of the array, the 9 godly generals and the warriors of Elysium could not block it. They were killed all the way back, and could only rely on the innermost array to defend. The innermost array was a defensive array, and it was not so easy to break. But Master Yuanji and Chaoshen were already standing at the back, and began to command the people to focus on attacking the weak points of the array to break it. Although they could not break the array in one go, they had already shaken it, and breaking it was only a matter of time. Jun Wuxian looked at Chu Xiu and the others, and his expression did not change at all. Originally, I did not expect them to be able to block it. As long as I kill you before they can block it, the situation will be broken. Chapter 1307. Inside the Gate of Heaven, Zhu Tianxiao was laboriously controlling the formation. Sweat flowed down his fat face like a stream. The defensive formation of the Gate of Heaven hadn't been activated for thousands of years. The last time it was activated was when Dugu Weiwei came. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei had already damaged the formation, but it hadn't been completely repaired. It wasn't that the Gate of Heaven was lazy and didn't want to repair it, but that they couldn't. It was the ancient experts who had built the Gate of Heaven. They had gathered the power of all the sects in the ancient Jianghu to build the Gate of Heaven's formation. Although the subsequent Gate of Heaven's warriors were also quite strong, they certainly couldn't compare to the ancient formation grandmasters. Therefore, although Zhu Tianxiao was controlling the formation with all his strength, he kept retreating. He could feel the formation's power weakening bit by bit. Zhu Tianxiao roared without turning his head. Shui Wuli, what are you still standing there for? Are you watching the show? Hurry up and transfer some inner strength to me. I can't hold on much longer. Shui Wuli's lips curled into an unfathomable smile. What's the hurry? How would I know if you didn't tell me? Don't worry, I'm coming. A bloody shadow condensed in Shui Wuli's hand. The gloomy demonic qi and blood qi merged to form a boundless sharp blade. Shui Wuli slowly walked to Zhu Tianxiao's back. The blood-red blade in his hand abruptly pierced into Zhu Tianxiao's back. With a soft poochie sound, the blade came out of Zhu Tianxiao's heart. Zhu Tianxiao first looked down at the bloody blade protruding from his chest, then turned his head with difficulty to look at Shui Wuli. He said in disbelief. Why? They were both at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Even if Zhu Tianxiao was only good at divination and formations, and not at fighting, he wouldn't have been so easily ambushed by Shui Wuli. But at this time, all his energy was focused on the tactical formation. He did not expect that Shui Wuli, who was also one of the 9 divine generals of Tianmen, who had no enmity with him, would sneak attack him at this time and place, giving him a fatal blow. The blood-red blade in Shui Wuli's hand suddenly erupted, and a dense demonic blood qi instantly seeped into Zhu Tianxiao's meridians, shattering his heart vessels. When Zhu Tianxiao was completely dead, Shui Wuli shrugged his shoulders and said, "Don't blame me. I just took a different path from you. All of you followed Jun Wuxian to the end, but I want to live. I want to live more freely. Instead of being a nuisance immortal general in the Elysium, and having to worry about the ranking of immortal generals all day long, I don't want to live such a precarious life anymore. After today, I will be the leader of the Kunlun Devil cult. Oh no, I mean the leader of the holy cult. At that time, I will burn more joss paper for you." Shui Wuli tossed Zhu Tianxiao's corpse to the side. He looked at the core of the formation and scratched his head. He didn't know how to use it. But it didn't matter. Although he didn't know how to set up arrays, he knew that it was difficult to fix them, but it was very easy to destroy them. So Shui Wuli directly exploded with his strongest power, and blasted it at the center of the formation. No matter how strong the core of the Elysium's formation was, it couldn't withstand such a powerful attack from both inside and outside. So in the next moment, it directly shattered. At this time, even Master Yuanji and Chaoying, who were in charge of breaking the formation, were stunned. Why was this thing so strong on the outside but weak on the inside? After destroying the core of the formation, Xue Wuli's task was actually almost completed. The plan that Chu Xiu had given him was to act according to the situation. He had destroyed the formation and helped Chu Xiu and the others to save time and casualties. Just this merit alone was enough for him to become a leader of the Kunlun devil cult. But Xue Wuli was still somewhat unwilling, or rather, anxious to prove his ability in order to win a good impression in front of his new master. He looked at the Elysium Immortal General's hall behind him, and suddenly had an idea. He ran straight in that direction. At this time, on the battlefield, Jun Wuxian had just said that he would be able to kill Chu Xiu before the warriors of the Elysium could no longer hold on. In the end, in the blink of an eye, the formation had already been broken. Without the protection of the formation, the warriors of the Elysium were being killed and forced to retreat. They didn't even have the slightest ability to fight back. This caused Jun Wuxian's expression to become extremely gloomy. He didn't know what exactly had happened, but in his heart, he was constantly cursing Zhu Tianxiao and Xue Wuli for being so useless. They couldn't even defend the formation. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Jun Wuxian, it seems that the people of the Elysium are not as strong as you think. I've long since said that the previous generations of your Heaven Gate's gate masters were all selfish people. The Elysium could not only have 9 immortal generals, if you wanted, you could even have 90 immortal generals. But the previous leaders of the Elysium only occupied the best resources, and even deliberately suppressed the other immortal generals, all because they didn't want the immortal generals to threaten their own positions. In the future, if the previous leaders of the Elysium could be more magnanimous, you wouldn't have fallen to such a state. From today onwards, the Elysium will no longer exist." "No longer exist? As long as I am alive, I am the Elysium." As soon as Jun Wuxian's voice fell, the demonic shadows around him shot up to the sky, and the ruin of 10,000 demons was displayed once again, directly enveloping everyone within it. At the same time, the 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction appeared behind him, crushing straight towards Chu Xiu. He could also see that among the 5 of them, the strongest was Chu Xiu, and the only one who had mastered the divine power was also Chu Xiu. As long as he got rid of Chu Xiu, everything would be easy to deal with. At this moment, Jun Wuxian, the devil and the Buddha became one, and his power was incomparably terrifying. Chen Qingdi, Old Celestial Master, Yi Shaonan, and Wei Shuya were all surrounded by countless demonic shadows, and they were exhausted to deal with them. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and formed a seal with his hand, and a Buddhist light suddenly appeared in his palm. The dazzling Buddhist light shot up to the sky, and the cross-shaped lotus flower bloomed, instantly melting the demonic shadows. A strange look appeared in Jun Wuxian's eyes. The second divine power. This was already the second divine power that Chu Xiu had displayed. For a martial immortal of his level, it was already not easy to master the first divine power. How did he master the second divine power? The ruin of 10,000 demons was melted, and the cross-shaped lotus flower seal collided with the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. The power of the 6 paths of reincarnation kept wearing down the power of the cross-shaped lotus flower seal. He had actually used a martial skill to directly confront the divine power, and he had even blocked it. However, at this moment, Jun Wuxian suddenly moved. His body turned into a black light, as if he had traveled through time and space, and instantly appeared in front of Chen Qingdi. No one expected that Jun Wuxian, who had always treated Chu Xiu as his main target, would change his target at this moment. Even Chu Xiu at this moment was completely focused on defending against Jun Wuxian's attack, and did not react in time. Jun Wuxian's body shone with a golden light, and on his body, specks of Sanskrit shone. At this moment, Jun Wuxian looked extremely solemn and dignified, as if he was a Buddhist protector. At this moment, Chu Xiu had already recognized the cultivation method that his opponent was using. It was actually the Heavenly Luo Treasure Buddha's indestructible golden body. To be precise, the indestructible golden body was no longer a cultivation method, but a divine power. Back in the Central Plains, Fa Ming had forcibly carved the indestructible golden body's runes on his body, so he could borrow a portion of the indestructible golden body's power. But now, what Jun Wuxian had displayed was the real indestructible golden body. Jun Wuxian's fist came crashing down, and Chen Qingdi did not dodge or retreat. The true fire of the internal strength around his body was restrained, and like a volcano that was about to erupt, he attacked at the same time as Jun Wuxian. In an instant, a powerful force exploded, and the Kunlun mountain range under their feet began to shake violently, and avalanches began to erupt. Chen Qingdi let out a muffled groan, and his right arm had already been twisted. Chen Qingdi was not a martial immortal, and he could fight a martial immortal head-on because his strength was enough to crush the power of rules that a martial immortal could control. But now this punch from Jun Wuxian was at the peak of his physical strength, and it was just pure strength, without any rules. How was Chen Qingdi going to crush it? When the second punch came, Chen Qingdi used his left fist to meet the attack, but his left arm was smashed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Although he was seriously injured, Chen Qingdi still did not retreat, and the fighting spirit in his eyes grew stronger. He cultivated the true fire to temper his body, and his whole body had been tempered to be harder than a god weapon. Even without his arms, he still had his legs. At this time the old heavenly master, who was closest to him, had already reacted. He threw all kinds of thunder in his hand, but when they hit Jun Wuxian, they did not have the slightest effect, and they were all nullified by the Sanskrit outside his body. The old heavenly master stomped his foot, gritted his teeth and said, "Forget it, this old man has put in a lot of effort today." As the old heavenly master's voice fell, he formed a seal with his hand, and countless thunder talismans shone around him. There were green, red, purple, and blue, and every thunder talisman was different. It even included the countless thunder talismans in the celestial master's mansion, big and small. At this time, the sky was filled with dark clouds, as if there was an innate god emerging from the dark clouds. As the old heavenly master's seal fell, countless thunder talismans shrouded Jun Wuxian. The strangest thing was that the thunder talismans seemed to have turned into a liquid state, and like chains, they wrapped around Jun Wuxian tightly. The thunder water talismans kept exploding, eroding the Sanskrit on Jun Wuxian's indestructible golden body, and finally stopped his last punch from landing. After using this move, the old heavenly master seemed to have lost a lot of his strength. He wiped the sweat off his head, shook his head and said, "This old man has given it his all, the rest is up to you guys." Jun Wuxian, who was restrained by the thunder water talismans, laughed coldly, and the golden Sanskrit around him lit up, making him look extremely solemn. However, just as he was about to unleash the power of the indestructible golden body to the maximum, and break free from the chains, he suddenly groaned in pain. His face, which had always been calm, even began to distort, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his aura dropped. The old heavenly master was stunned, and he looked at his hands in disbelief. When did he become so strong? Chapter 1308. Outside the Hall of the Divine Generals, the most magnificent palace in the center belonged to the master of the Elysium, Jun Wuxian's hall. The qi of heaven and earth there was the densest, even more than 10 times that of the other divine generals. Xue Wuli had cultivated there for a period of time before Chu Xiu attacked the Elysium, and his cultivation had improved greatly. Usually, other divine generals, except for Diwu Qi Song, were not qualified to enter there. Only a divine general who had made great contributions could enter to cultivate. But now, Jun Wuxian had led the other 9 divine generals to the outside world to fight. The door of the hall was not closed, and the core of the formation had been destroyed by him, which meant that Xue Wuli could enter at will. Stepping into the hall, Xue Wuli walked to the deepest part according to his memory, and saw the 9 soul lamps that represented the 9 divine generals. But 4 of them had been extinguished, except for Zhu Tianxiao. In such a short time, 3 more divine generals had been killed. Xue Wuli wanted to touch the soul lamp, but when he got close, he was repelled by the formation. There was a separate formation outside the soul lamp, but it was not for protection. It was to prevent accidents from happening when someone accidentally touched the soul lamp while cultivating. The soul lamps of the 9 divine generals were not Xue Wuli's target. He was going for Jun Wuxian's soul lamp. Further in, there was a huge throne, gilded and shining with a sense of vicissitudes. Shwe Wuli walked around the throne, and a golden soul lamp appeared in front of him. The flame on the soul lamp was even bigger than the other 9 soul lamps combined. In the past, when he was cultivating in the secret land of the Elysium, Shwe Wuli had heard some senior divine generals talk about the secrets of the Elysium. The master of the Elysium was very careful. Only when he had a very short time left in his life would he appoint the next successor of the master of the Elysium and pass all the restrictions and inheritance to him. Therefore, it was easy to cause the new master of the Elysium to lack prestige. It was recorded in the history of the Elysium that there had been rebellions by divine generals, but they had been suppressed. In one generation, due to the personal preferences of the previous leader of the Elysium, the successor that he appointed before his death was not the strongest among the 9 godly generals. As a result, there were people who were dissatisfied and joined forces with the other godly generals to start a rebellion. In the end, 8 of the 9 godly generals died in that generation, and only one godly general who took over the position of the new sect master survived. The reason why the Sky Gate sect master, who had just taken over, could control the life and death of the other god generals was because of this soul lamp. The sect master had also placed a portion of his soul in the lamp, but it was not to prevent him from escaping. Instead, it was to control the other 9 divine generals. So, if I destroy this soul lamp, what will the result be? Therefore, Shwe Wuli began to attack the formation crazily. However, because this was a formation used to protect the sect leader soul lamp, its sturdiness was beyond Shwe Wuli's imagination. Clenching his teeth, Shwe Wuli's eyes revealed a ruthless look. Since he had decided to pledge his allegiance to the Kunlun devil cult, he had to make sure that his pledge of allegiance was loud and clear. In an instant, Shwe Wuli began to burn his blood essence, and a strong force penetrated the formation. Boundless blood light enveloped it, and with a loud bang, the formation was shattered. Mobilizing the last bit of his chi and blood, Shwe Wuli turned it into a sharp blade and cut the soul lamp into pieces. In an instant, a strong wave of the primordial spirit spread throughout the entire hall, and Shwe Wuli was hit so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood. The primordial spirit power emitted from the soul lamp turned into Jun Wushin's face, and he looked at Shwe Wuli with a ferocious expression. He shouted angrily, "Shwe Wuli, you're courting death." That voice resounded in Shwe Wuli's mind, causing his scalp to go numb. In an instant, his face was filled with fear. After all, Jun Wushin had been the Sky Gate sect master for so many years. Although Shwe Wuli had become a traitor in the end, when he saw Jun Wushin appear before him, he still could not hide the fear in his heart. But fortunately, that was only the remnants of the primordial spirit power. After shouting that sentence, it dissipated. Shwe Wuli sat where he was, spat out a mouthful of blood, and let out a long sigh. This proof of allegiance was enough, and the rest had nothing to do with him anymore. At that moment in the battlefield, as Jun Wushin spat out blood and was seriously injured, everyone present felt a little confused, even the celestial master. But when Jun Wushin spat out the words, "Shwe Wuli, you're courting death," Chu Xiu suddenly understood that Shwe Wuli must have made a move. To be honest, although Chu Xiu had instigated a traitor like Shwe Wuli in reality, he really did not have high expectations for Shwe Wuli. One was because Chu Xiu was used to putting the biggest chance of winning on himself. Simply put, he did not trust Shwe Wuli that much. Also, Shwe Wuli was after all a newly advanced divine general, and he was certainly not too familiar with some of the secrets of the Sky Gate. Who would have thought that he would give Chu Xiu an unexpected surprise? Although he did not know what method he had used, he had still managed to injure Jun Wushin. At that moment, Chu Xiu had already seized the opportunity. The formation breaker slashed down with his sword, but there was no trace of knife will. Endless demonic chi condensed in midair, and the next moment, the bright moon hung high in the sky. In the endless sharp light, Jun Wushin's figure was illuminated. The clouds parted, the moon shone brightly, and the clear sky reflected the shadow. Feeling the power, Jun Wushin's expression finally changed at that moment. This was already the third magic that Chu Xiu had displayed, and it was such a powerful magic that it made him tremble. Jun Wushan could not care less about the pain in his primordial spirit, and he displayed the indestructible golden body to the extreme, trying to break free from the celestial master's chains of thunder and water. But at that moment, Wei Shuya and Yi Xiaonan, who had already reacted, attacked at the same time. Wei Shuya made a seal with his hands, and a thin line of fire condensed in his hands, entangling Jun Wushan. The line of fire seemed to be only as thick as a hair, and even if one did not sense it carefully, one would not be able to detect it. But the power it contained seemed so amazing that it almost drained all of Wei Shuya's strength. This was the power of the rootless sacred fire. Because Wei Shuya had refined the supreme god elixir, there was a trace of the power of the rootless sacred fire in his body. Although it was only a trace, the power he condensed was the same as the rootless sacred fire. It was an incarnation of the rules of nature. That trace of fire easily cut the Sanskrit around Jun Wushan's body and broke his indestructible golden body. At the same time, Yi Xiaonan's heaven-mending heart sutra was used to the extreme. Cracks appeared all over Jun Wushan's body, and he was completely dragged in. He was strangled by the power of space, and the chains of thunder and water also penetrated into his body, causing Jun Wushan to groan. With the three of them joining forces, Jun Wushan was finally injured, and he lost his last chance to fight back. The clear sky illuminating shadow had already descended. The strong saber will penetrated Jun Wushan's body, causing his physical body to be torn apart inch by inch, and a large amount of blood spurted out. In that instant, Jun Wushan let out a long howl, his voice filled with endless pain and ferocity. The cracks spread all over his body, turning him into a bloody man. It was an abnormally terrifying sight. But even in such a state, Jun Wushan displayed the 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment brilliance will once again, and smashed it at Wei Shuya. The clear sky illuminating shadow slash was a mystic skill that could not be defended against, and could only be resisted with the strength of one's physical body. But Jun Wushan was the only person that Chu Xiu had ever seen who was able to continue to fight in such a state without forcing himself to hold on. Wei Shuya had not thought of this, and so he was sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. Of course, even if he had reacted, it would have been useless. Condensing the power of the rootless sacred flame had already used up most of his physical strength. Turning around and forming a seal, Jun Wushan used the blood that was flowing out of his body to condense a blood-red spear. The spear was burning with scarlet flames that could burn through the void. Fire dragon lights the lamp. Jun Wushan, in such a heavily injured state, once again displayed his mystic skill. This time, the spear was aimed directly at Yi Xiaonan. Even Chu Xiu could not dodge the spear of the fire dragon lights the lamp. Even though Yi Xiaonan's Divine Mend Heart Sutra was extremely magical, it was useless against such an attack. The power that the Divine Mend Heart Sutra controlled was close to the use of the rules of space, but in the face of this spear, it was all extinguished. But at that moment, Yi Xiaonan saw that he could not dodge it, so he pressed forward and formed a seal with one hand, as though he was mending the sky with one hand. Time and space were frozen in that instant. The spear tip of the fire dragon lights the lamp was imprisoned in the void, and as the seal fell, it was completely sealed. Only a mystic skill could resist a mystic skill. Yi Xiaonan's Divine Mend seal was something he had already mastered when he was in the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Now that he had become a martial immortal, and under the pressure of the fire dragon lights the lamp, his cultivation technique had actually advanced into a mystic skill that belonged to Yi Xiaonan himself. However, there were differences between mystic skills. How could the mystic skill that Yi Xiaonan had comprehended after a temporary breakthrough compare to the fire dragon lights that had already been completed? Although he was expressionless, blood kept flowing down his right arm. His breathing was low, and it was obvious that his arm had been crippled. Jun Wushan's entire body trembled. He looked at Chu Xiu, whose strength had been drained by the clear sky reflecting shadow. His voice was as cold as a ghost's. "Is that all you've got? Do you really think this slash can destroy my physical body?" Jun Wushan's physical body was clearly on the verge of collapse, but it still had an extremely strong vitality. As his voice fell, the blood that flowed out of his body splashed outwards at an even faster speed, but it did not scatter. Instead, it gathered together, forming a blood man, that was completely made of blood, and his physical body had already turned into ashes. When Lu Jianghe, who was fighting with the people of Heaven's Gate below, saw this scene, he could not help but exclaim, F***CK. Heaven's Gate actually copied my cultivation technique. Shameless. Chapter 1309. Of course, Jun Wuxian would not copy Lu Jianghe's cultivation method. Although the blood demon power technique was very magical, the Elysium had even more magical cultivation methods. Under the clear sky shadow, although Jun Wuxian's physical body was not completely destroyed like Chu Xiu's other opponents, he had injured Wei Shuya and Yi Xiaonan one after another, so he could no longer use it. However, he immediately discovered the weakness of the clear sky shadow, which was that it could not destroy one's primordial spirit. Jun Wuxian had also cultivated primordial spirit secret techniques before. He was now using his powerful primordial spirit to abandon his physical body and forcibly control his qi and blood. The majestic power of qi and blood rushed into the sky as Jun Wuxian formed a seal with both hands. At this moment, 6 arms appeared on his blood-red body, which gave off the feeling of a Sanskrit cultivation method. However, the seal formed by his hands was the most authentic Taoist seal. It was an authentic Taoist seal that even the old celestial master felt ashamed of himself. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei destroyed the Elysium. Now Chu Xiu wants to do it again. Do you think you are Dugu Weiwei? The Elysium of today is no longer the Elysium of 500 years ago. The Kunlun devil cult of today is no longer the Kunlun devil cult of 500 years ago. A strange smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. You are wrong. How do you know that I am not? Before Jun Wuxian could understand what Chu Xiu meant, the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet in Chu Xiu's hand was already shining brightly. The 6 paths of reincarnation glowed with golden light. In the void, the powerful primordial spirit power shook the hearts of everyone present. The moment Jun Wuxian saw the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, his expression finally changed. He shouted in shock, "It's you!" However, before Jun Wuxian could finish speaking, the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet directly pulled Jun Wuxian's primordial spirit into it. At this moment, Jun Wuxian finally understood why Chu Xiu dared to attack the Elysium at this time, and why Chu Xiu's strength had skyrocketed to such a terrifying level. It was all because of the Daoyu Ocean. The impact of the 6 paths of reincarnation illusion that he had suffered when the array went berserk was not an accident at all, but was deliberately done by Chu Xiu. Back at the exalted divine palace, Chu Xiu hadn't been able to bring out the 6 paths reincarnation bracelet's full power due to the distance. At this moment, he was using the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet face to face. Chu Xiu did not hesitate to use the full power of his primordial soul, allowing Jun Wuxian to constantly be reincarnated in the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. Jun Wuxian's willpower was so strong that it could be said that he was the strongest martial artist that Chu Xiu had ever seen. He had reincarnated more than 20 times, but he was still able to persevere and maintain his state of mind. However, more than half of Chu Xiu's primordial soul power had been consumed. If this continued, both sides would still suffer. But at this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. The illusion in front of Jun Wuxian disappeared, and he was freed from the reincarnation. After more than 20 reincarnations, although Jun Wuxian could maintain his state of mind, his consciousness was still a little chaotic and blurry. But when he felt all this, Jun Wuxian laughed loudly. Chu Xiu, you can't hold on any longer, can you? It is your luck that you can come to the Daoyu Ocean, but you want to destroy the Elysium. This is your death sentence. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei failed to destroy the Elysium, and now it will be the same. Chu Xiu's figure appeared in front of Jun Wuxian, and he raised his eyebrows. Oh, is that so? 500 years ago, I let the Elysium go because I wanted you to continue guarding the passage between the higher and lower worlds. But now I don't need you anymore. Is there still a need for you to exist? Jun Wuxian suddenly felt that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's tone. But the next moment, Chu Xiu's appearance suddenly changed. He became the person that the martial artists of the Elysium could not forget and feared the most. Dugu Weiwei. Impossible. You can't be Dugu Weiwei. At this moment, Jun Wuxian's state of mind was completely lost. Although he didn't dare to believe that the Chu Xiu in front of him was Dugu Weiwei, the charm in his appearance was exactly the same as the image left by the Elysium, and the mark left by Dugu Weiwei in the past. Now, the Dugu Weiwei that Chu Xiu had outlined was based on the image of Heavenly Soul. Moreover, Tianhun's image was exactly the same as Dugu Weiwei's. He had even managed to fool the people from the Celestial de Luo, let alone Jun Wuxian, who had only seen Dugu Weiwei's image in the imprint and image. Jun Wuxian's state of mind was extremely tough. He was proud and conceited. Of course, he had the capital to be so. Although Jun Wuxian's strength was unprecedented, he was at least ranked among the previous Elysium masters. In the entire Jianghu, besides Zhong Shenxiu, no one else was worthy of his attention. But the only one who could make him feel defeated and even fear was not Zhong Shenxiu, but Dugu Weiwei. The one who had left a mark and slapped away all his pride and conceit, causing him to completely lose his state of mind, was Dugu Weiwei. When he saw the scene in front of him, Jun Wuxian's state of mind was completely lost. In the 6 paths of reincarnation, it rotated crazily again. But this time, Jun Wuxian was unable to hold on. His spirit was completely torn apart by the endless reincarnation, and his true spirit was shattered. Until the last moment, there was only one person imprinted in Jun Wuxian's spirit, Dugu Weiwei. The blood man, which was supported by the power of Jun Wuxian's spirit, suddenly dissipated with a bang, turning into blood that flowed to the ground. Chu Xiu put away the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. His face was as pale as a sheet. This battle was really very dangerous. If he had not thought of such a move to break Jun Wuxian's state of mind, it was estimated that in the end, he might have to fight to the point of exhausting his primordial spirit to be able to completely defeat Jun Wuxian. Old Celestial Master sighed and patted his chest. Oh my, this is the last time I will fight in a battle like this. If I do it again, I'm afraid I will die prematurely. On the other side, although Chen Qingdi and Yi Xiaonan were both injured, their eyes were filled with fighting spirit, and they even felt that they had not lost out. What these two people pursued was the extreme of power. Fighting with an expert like Jun Wuxian could be said to have benefited them greatly. Wei Shuya walked over and asked, "Are you all right? Is Jun Wuxian dead?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I'm fine. I just used up too much power. Jun Wuxian is completely dead. His true spirit has been destroyed in the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet." Rama's true spirit had been rescued during the destruction of the Sabodhi Zen monastery. From then on, Chu Xiu had become more cautious. Most warriors would die if their physical bodies were destroyed. However, there were some warriors who were special. Their spirit might be abnormal and could preserve their true spirit. Therefore, when Chu Xiu killed people, he first targeted the physical body, and secondly, he targeted the primordial spirit and true spirit. Moreover, after obtaining the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, Chu Xiu basically did not have to worry about this. With the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, he could completely destroy any spirit or true spirit. Throwing a handful of elixirs into his mouth, Chu Xiu stared ahead and said in a deep voice, "Attack the gate of heaven. Kill all the heavenly generals of heaven. Leave no one alive." These heavenly generals of the Elysium were all brainwashed by Jun Wuxian. Other than Xue Wuli, who was a newly promoted heavenly general, the rest of them saw Jun Wuxian as a god. Even if they wanted to surrender, Chu Xiu would not dare to do so. Actually, there was no need for Chu Xiu to say it. Lu Jianghe and the others had already led the people of the major sects to attack the gate of heaven. However, the people of Heaven's Gate were rather strong-willed. Among the 9 heavenly generals, for example, Diwu Qi Song and Lin Songlong, even though they knew that Jun Wuxian was dead, they exploded with even more power and began to fight with their lives. Unfortunately, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. They were directly surrounded and killed. Shang Tianliang led the people into the gate of heaven and went straight to Jun Wuxian's hall in the center. Opening the door, he saw Xue Wuli, who was lying on the ground recovering his strength. Shang Tianliang laughed coldly and said, "Oh, there's still a survivor of Heaven's Gate hiding here. Fine, I will send you on your way today to accompany your gate master." Xue Wuli was shocked and quickly shouted, We're on the same side. We're on the same side. We're cult master Chu's spies in the gate of heaven. Kunlun's holy sect, thousands of years. Unify the pugilistic world and dominate the world. Cult master Chu's divine might is unparalleled and awe-inspiring in the pugilistic world. Xue Wuli was so scared that he started to recite a series of sentences. The other warriors of the Kunlun devil cult were all blushing. He was also extremely afraid. He had done so much, and it was not easy for him to endure until the heavenly gates were destroyed. It was time for him to be rewarded according to his contributions, but in the end he had been mistakenly killed by his own people. He would die with grievance even if he died. At this time Lu Jianghe walked in. Xue Wuli recognized him. It was Lu Jianghe who had placed the blood god seal on Xue Wuli. Therefore Xue Wuli immediately said, "Demon Lord Lu, quickly prove to me that I'm really on the same side." When Xue Wuli called out to Demon Lord Lu Jianghe beamed with joy. He said to Shang Tianliang and the others, "Don't be so nervous. This kid is on the same side. We were able to break through the gate of heaven thanks to this kid being a snitch. No, a spy." Hearing this, Shang Tianliang waved his hand and asked someone to help Xue Wuli up and take him away for treatment. When the gate of heaven had been completely broken through and everyone had been cleaned up, Chu Xiu, who had recovered his strength, officially stepped into the gate of heaven. Although the other sects did not leave at this time, they did not tactlessly fight with the Kunlun devil cult for the treasures of the gate of heaven. The moon-worshipping cult and the Taoist master mansion had discussed this in advance. Moreover, in this battle, Chu Xiu had indeed contributed the most. The others had also seen the strength of the Kunlun devil cult, so naturally, they did not dare to fight with the Kunlun devil cult. Seeing that the top sects like the moon-worshipping cult and the Taoist master mansion had given up on the idea of fighting with the Kunlun devil cult, the other sects naturally did not dare to act recklessly. After entering the gate of heaven, Chu Xiu did not first look at the various treasures of the gate of heaven. Instead, he went to the deepest part of the gate of heaven, to the center of the 10 ceiling formations. The things there were the most important, and also what Chu Xiu wanted the most. There was a yang source of the upper mortal realm sealed there. Chapter 13:10. Origin was something that Chu Xiu had learned from Tianhun. Although Chu Xiu could not completely believe everything that Tianhun had said regarding the origin, Tianhun should not have lied to Chu Xiu. Now, the devil qi in Chu Xiu's body should be the devil origin that had descended to the mortal world. Although this devil origin usually did not show itself, it had helped Chu Xiu a lot at critical moments. However, now that Chu Xiu's strength was not enough, he could not mobilize it at all. He also did not know how to mobilize the power of the devil origin. Now that another yang origin was about to be in his hands, what would it bring to Chu Xiu? At this time, Xue Wuli was following behind Chu Xiu. With an extremely obedient look, he told him everything that he had done in the gate of heaven. He was a smart person. At this time, he did not exaggerate or show off his achievements. As long as he did what he deserved, even if Chu Xiu wanted to buy people's hearts, he would still give him what he deserved. Hearing this, Chu Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, I promised you a hall leader position before, so I will definitely not go back on my word. In the future, you can establish an independent hall in the Holy Church. All the surrendered disciples in the gate of heaven can be under your command. In the Holy Church, I will also give you a portion to help you stabilize your position. You should know about the Daluocean matters. In the future, I will also bring you to the Daluocean and give you resources to help you enter the mysterious heaven and earth realm as soon as possible." Hearing this, Xue Wuli was immediately overjoyed. He bowed deeply to Chu Xiu and said, "Your subordinate thanks you for your guidance. I wish you a long life and unify the Jianghu." Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, "Forget it, the Holy Church does not care about this. As long as you do your job well, it is more important than anything else." Although Xue Wuli's flattery made people feel relaxed and happy, they would get tired of it after listening to it for too long. Xue Wuli nodded and pointed to a stone wall that was engraved with all kinds of runes. "Leader, this is the center of the gate of heaven's ceiling formation." Chu Xiu nodded and let Xue Wuli leave first. while he carefully looked around. The shape of this stone wall was very peculiar. It was shaped like an arch, and it was densely engraved with runes. In truth, this was the true form of the gate. The other 10 formations, as well as the ones on the exalted divine palace's side, were used to seal the gate. 10,000 years ago, the cultivators of the lower realms had entered the Daluotian continent through this place, and this was where the extreme yang source was sealed. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. Without the slightest hesitation, Gang Qi erupted from the formation-breaking tool in his hand to the extreme, affecting the surrounding laws of heaven and earth. It transformed into a giant blade that was hundreds of meters long and slashed at the stone wall. With a loud explosion, the entire stone wall suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light, and a part of the runes shattered. But it was only a part, and the entire stone wall was still extremely stable. As Chu Xiu's blade fell, the runes became fewer and fewer, and the stone wall began to tremble. Even the ceiling formations in the 10 halls of the Gate of Heaven began to crack. When Chu Xiu's final slash landed, the 10 formations completely exploded. At the same time, cracks started to appear on the stone walls. In an instant, a wave of extremely dense energy of the universe surged out from the cracks and rushed towards them. It was a familiar aura, an aura that belonged to the exalted divine palace. At this time, Yi Xiaonan and the others, as well as the other martial artists, were waiting at the foot of Kunlun. The reason why they hadn't left was simple. They were waiting for Chu Xiu's promise. If it was true, then the Kunlun devil cult could eat the meat, and they could drink the soup, then everything would be fine. If Chu Xiu had really lied to them this time, then even if the Kunlun devil cult really had the capital to dominate the world, they would not sit still and wait for death. After all, the Kunlun devil cult had already become so powerful 500 years ago, and yet there were still people who dared to resist. In the instant that Chu Xiu broke through the heavenly gate, the powerful energy completely enveloped them, causing their expressions to change. They were both surprised and overjoyed. They had never seen such a level of qi of heaven and earth in any secret land or treasure land. What Chu Xiu said was true. Of course, this was only on Kunlun Mountain, next to the Gate of Heaven, so the qi of heaven and earth they felt was very rich. If it were spread throughout the martial arts world, it would not be so obvious, but it was enough to raise the level of qi in the martial arts world by a level. At this time, Chu Xiu's attention was not on the raging qi of heaven and earth, but on the crack in the center of the stone wall, where a golden light had emerged. The golden light was very faint and inconspicuous, as if the power of the broken runes had not been completely consumed. In fact, Chu Xiu did not even notice it at first. What really made Chu Xiu lock onto it was that the moment it appeared, the source of demonic path in Chu Xiu's body, which was silent most of the time, suddenly moved slightly, as if attracted by the other party. Chu Xiu carefully drove his Gang Qi, wanting to hold it in his hand. But who would have thought that the source of yang was not difficult to capture? When Chu Xiu's Gang Qi fell on it, it instantly escaped into Chu Xiu's body, so that Chu Xiu did not even have a chance to defend himself. This moment also scared Chu Xiu. He was going to study this thing first, but who would have thought that it would directly escape into his body, not giving him a chance at all? At this time, there were both the source of yang and the source of demonic path in Chu Xiu's body. These two sources in Chu Xiu's dantian were attracting each other, head and tail connected, like a Tai Chi yin and yang fish, rotating in an unusually harmonious and accurate cycle. Even when the two sources were different in color, their positions were exactly the same, so accurate that it was as if they were made by heaven. Furthermore, at the instant when the two source energies merged and revolved, the collision of the two brought forth a trace of energy ripple. It was just a tiny energy ripple, but it filled Chu Xiu's body in an instant, causing all the power in his body to explode abruptly. Chu Xiu groaned in pain in an instant. The next moment, with absolute willpower, Chu Xiu controlled his body to forcibly refine the energy. In fact, cracks even appeared on the skin around him, making him look like a person made of blood. It was an extremely terrifying scene. Chu Xiu had not expected that he would be able to fight against Jun Wuxian and kill him only because he had exhausted too much of his energy. But in this place, he would actually be seriously injured. Fortunately, to the two source energies, the energy ripple was only a trace that was unconsciously released. As such, Chu Xiu was still able to suppress it. After he completely suppressed the energy ripple, he discovered that his cultivation had skyrocketed to the third heavenly layer, martial immortal. That stunned Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had experienced many breakthroughs in cultivation, it was the first time he had made such a baffling breakthrough. The power of the extreme yin source energies and the extreme yang source energies was simply terrifying. Just the trace of extremely weak energy that leaked out when the two source energies merged allowed him to step into the next heavenly layer. According to what Tianhun had said, the gathering of three source energies of the same attribute might really be able to open the legendary longevity heaven. Although the two source energies were in his body, Chu Xiu did not know whether they were good or bad. He could not use them for the time being. However, it was a treasure among treasures. Even if he could not use it, he still had to get his hands on it first. At that moment, in the instant that Chu Xiu shattered the heavenly gate and obtained the extreme yang source energies, a violent tremor came from the exalted divine palace. However, the tremor was only contained within the central prefecture. Only those who stood at the peak of the Daluotian continent could sense it. In an instant, several halos of light appeared in the sky above the exalted divine palace's formation. They were not physical objects. Even experts at the ninth heavenly layer of martial immortal could not instantly traverse a region and arrive at the exalted divine palace. This was merely a means of communication that they had constructed when they were building the formation. A dignified and solemn voice came from one of the halos that was filled with dazzling Buddhist light. The formation of the lower realm has been damaged. Something must have happened to the gatekeepers we left in the lower realm. In another halos of light, the color of primal chaos stirred. A voice that was difficult to distinguish whether it was a man or a woman spoke with a hint of mockery. Something happened? Thousands of years ago, when we completely lost contact with them, they were already in trouble. Starlight sparkled in another halos of light as a gentle voice spoke. Everyone, arguing about this is useless. The formation of the lower realm has been destroyed, which means that the formation in the exalted divine palace won't be able to hold out for much longer. After some time, we will be able to reconnect the passage to the lower realm. Is everyone ready for this? Or should we reinforce the formation and maintain its original state? The voice in the Buddhist light spoke again, this time with a sigh. Perhaps this is fate. We made a mistake 10,000 years ago. The Daoyu Ocean is not a place that belongs to us. We should have faced our tribulations in the lower realm. After the tribulation, we will naturally be reborn. We forcefully broke through the Daoyu Ocean barrier, slaughtered the natives, and occupied this world that does not belong to us. We have violated the karma of the heavenly Tao. This is our original sin. When that person appeared from the lower realm 500 years ago, countless Daoyuotian experts died. Perhaps this is the punishment that the heavens have bestowed upon us. Now there are already secret realms that have begun to wither and decline. The tribulation of heaven and earth has never passed. The tribulation is not aimed at heaven and earth, but at us. Today, the formation of the lower realm has been broken, and the passage between the two realms has reopened. Perhaps this is the guidance of the heavens for us to return to where we came from, and leave this world that does not belong to us. The androgynous voice became even more shrill and mocking. Hypocrites! If you are so unyielding, why did you move the heavenly Tao to the Daoyu Ocean? You know that this is the original sin, but in the western regions, you showed no mercy when you slaughtered the barbarians. The karma of the heavenly Tao? I am the heavenly Tao, I am karma. An even more dignified voice came from the Buddhist light. Heretic demons, how dare you speak of the karma of the heavenly Tao? As the anger between the two grew stronger and stronger, the Tao Master's old but sonorous voice suddenly descended. Enough. Chapter 13:11. Although Daoist Xinghe wasn't known as the Daoyu Ocean's #1 Daoyu Ocean, his prestige was still there. Everyone fell silent as soon as he spoke. Xinghe, what do you think? The gentle voice rang out again from within the circle of sparkling starlight. There's no point in arguing here. because we have no idea what's going on in the lower realm. Is there a problem with the people? Or is there a problem with the formation? My suggestion is to let nature take its course. You have poured so much effort into the exalted divine palace, and I'm sure none of you are willing to see it destroyed now. So whether we descend to the lower realms or not, when the formation's power is completely exhausted and it naturally disintegrates, we will be able to descend while preserving the exalted divine palace. But in the meantime, we should make preparations. Even if we descend to the lower realms, we must still prepare the heaven's stone. According to the ancestors, when we first came to the Dalu Ocean, we lost many of our companions because we didn't have enough heaven's stone. Those people are still buried in Central Province. After a long while, Daoist Xinghe nodded. I agree with Xinghe's suggestion. There was no response from the other circles of light, but they didn't object either. It seemed that they were in favor of the idea as well. Daoist Xinghe nodded. If that's the case, then let's all disperse. As the light faded, the exalted divine palace regained its calm. Chu Xiu didn't know that his actions had alarmed the Dalu Ocean higher-ups. But now that the formation was destroyed, especially without the suppression of the Yang source, the passage between the lower and lower realms would soon be completely destroyed. So Chu Xiu had to make preparations. Once outside, Chu Xiu asked Mei Qinglian, who was waiting outside, "Have the other sects left?" Mei Qinglian nodded. After realizing that we weren't deceiving them, they all dispersed. Chu Xiu nodded and called Xue Wuli over. "Take me to the sutra depository of the Gate of Heaven. Elder Wei and the rest should come too. Let's see if there's anything valuable." From Chu Xiu's point of view, the most valuable thing in the entire Elysium, apart from the Yang ability source, was the Elysium's treasured cultivation technique. Although the Elysium had been left behind by the Dalu Ocean in the lower world, they were not abandoned by the Dalu Ocean. Instead, they were the true loyal subordinates of the Dalu Ocean sections. They risked their lives to defend the lower world's formation. Therefore, the cultivation techniques they possessed were the core inheritance secret arts of the Dalu Ocean powers. They were extremely precious. Just look at Jun Wuxian, the clan master. Apart from Dugu Weiwei's inheritance, Chu Xiu's other cultivation techniques were obtained by himself through various means or by killing others. That was why he was able to gather all three branches of Taoism, Buddhism, and Demon. However, Jun Wuxian had only relied on the inheritance of the Elysium to control all the cultivation techniques of the three sections. There were even some extremely powerful magical powers. This was enough to prove the richness of the Elysium's collection. After Xue Wuli brought Chu Xiu into the sutra depository of the Elysium, Chu Xiu allowed them to search freely. At the same time, Chu Xiu was also searching. In fact, he had long been interested in the two cultivation techniques that Jun Wuxian possessed. One was the indestructible golden body, and the other was his 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. The indestructible golden body was the most powerful magical power of the heavenly Luo treasure Buddha. Its power was naturally amazing. However, Chu Xiu did not intend to cultivate it completely. Instead, he had a bold idea. The same was true for the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. Chu Xiu did not even want to walk the path that Dugu Weiwei had walked in the past. How could he walk the path of Jun Wuxian, a defeated opponent? He only wanted to combine it with his 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet to create a new and powerful cultivation technique. After obtaining the cultivation technique that he had chosen, Chu Xiu immediately entered into a state of seclusion. At the same time, he allowed the others to choose their own cultivation techniques to cultivate. In the Elysium seclusion chamber, Chu Xiu held the secret manual of the indestructible golden body and deeply imprinted every word in it into his mind. The reason why Chu Xiu wanted the indestructible golden body was very simple. He wanted to merge the indestructible golden body with the 9 heavens demonic golden body. These two cultivation techniques, one Buddhist and the other demonic, seemed to others to be playing with fire. However, Chu Xiu had been cultivating both Buddhism and demonic for a long time, so he did not have to worry about this at all. The sudden emergence of this idea was also the inspiration brought to Chu Xiu by the fusion of the demonic way and the Yang ability origin. Righteous, demonic, Yin and Yang were twins. Although they repelled each other, As long as they were used well, they would be able to achieve a delicate balance, just like these two origins. Chu Xiu had the same idea. It was not difficult to cultivate the indestructible golden body, and Chu Xiu did not intend to push it to the same level as Jun Wuxian, which was comparable to the divine powers. The difficult part was how to master a delicate balance between the two cultivation techniques. It took more than 20 days for Chu Xiu to finally master the balance. At this time, Chu Xiu was surrounded by golden Sanskrit and pitch-black demonic qi at the same time. The Sanskrit appeared on the golden body, but the deep demonic qi turned into armor, lingering around his body. The two forces repelled each other, but also depended on each other to achieve a balance. Letting out a long breath, Chu Xiu dispelled this state. At this time, there was no opponent, and he could not estimate to what extent his strength and defense could reach in this state. This kind of thing still needed to be practiced in actual combat. But now that these two cultivation techniques were merged together, it was not appropriate to use the previous name. Chu Xiu thought about it, and named it the Holy Demon Indestructible Body. Now Chu Xiu had not yet deduced it to a perfect state, but after the fusion of the 9 heavens demonic golden body of the ancient demon god Lu Wenhou and the indestructible golden body of Tian Luo Baosha, it might really reach the state of indestructible when it reached the extreme peak. After he was done with this cultivation technique, Chu Xiu opened the second cultivation technique that he had chosen. The second cultivation technique that Chu Xiu chose was actually not the 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment wheel, but the origin of the 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment wheel, which was also the secret technique of Tian Luo Baosha, the 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment wheel. The 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment wheel was an extension of the 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment wheel, and it was an exclusive martial skill that carried his strong martial arts imprint. Of course, Chu Xiu would not walk the same path as Jun Wuxian, so he had to look at the source. The 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment was a part of the scripture, which mainly explained the concept of the 6 paths of reincarnation, followed by the cultivation technique, which was to materialize the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The Hell Tao was sinister and vicious, the Animal Tao was fierce and violent, the Azura Tao was murderous and evil, the Hungry Ghost Tao was evil and strange, the Celestial Tao was mighty, and the Human Tao was the most bizarre, which was to eliminate all kinds of strange powers. This cultivation technique was very strange, and Chu Xiu had never heard of it in the Daoyu Ocean. Although Chu Xiu was not a Buddhist, and most of the Buddhists wanted to eat him alive, Chu Xiu had cultivated many Buddhist cultivation techniques. He even dared to say that even if the remaining Buddhists from the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery came, their attainments in Buddhist cultivation techniques would not be as good as Chu Xiu. In the eyes of the orthodox Buddhist warriors, the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation was simply rebellious to the extreme, and could even be said to be the heresy of heresy. It showed the ugly power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, directly in front of you. Cultivating a few of the powers was no different from rebelling, but it was very much in line with Chu Xiu's appetite. The path that Jun Wuxian took was to put his state of mind into the 6 paths of reincarnation to temper himself, feel the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and then control them, turning them into one, and strangling any existence. This was the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation. After Chu Xiu read the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation, his path was exactly the opposite of Jun Wuxian's. The 6 paths of reincarnation itself was a whole. Why should it be combined? When all kinds of powers were added together, it would be the real power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Especially with the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, he could perfectly control the charm of the 6 paths of reincarnation. This time, it took Chu Xiu 2 months to figure out the general idea of the cultivation method. At this time, around Chu Xiu, the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet shone brightly, and golden Buddha light formed a complete 6 paths of reincarnation around him. The power of the 6 paths of reincarnation continued to probe out, and the power of various attributes intertwined back and forth, sometimes combining, but reaching a strange balance. Even at this time, if there was someone in the 6 paths of reincarnation, as long as the other party was really attacked by the 6 paths of reincarnation, Their own primordial spirit would be damaged according to the various characteristics of the 6 paths of reincarnation. It could be said that it was a secret technique of the primordial spirit and the body, a double attack, which was stronger and more unpredictable than Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of reincarnation. Chu Xiu also discovered that ever since he merged the extreme yang source and the devil source in his body, he seemed to have comprehended something, but it also seemed that he did not comprehend anything. Instead, he subconsciously pursued a kind of balance. Previously, Tianhun had told him not to follow the old path of Dugu Weiwei, but Chu Xiu had no clue. Now he finally understood that he had actually embarked on a different path from Dugu Weiwei. After successfully deriving this cultivation method, Chu Xiu scratched his head. He still had to give this cultivation method a name. Chu Xiu was very satisfied with the power of this cultivation method. At present, he had only succeeded in the initial derivation, but in fact, it was already not inferior to the power of Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation. When it was developed to the extreme, it could even surpass some of the spells, so this name was very important. Based on the basic principle that the longer the name, the stronger it was. After thinking for a while, Chu Xiu finally named it 6 Paths of Saha Wondrous Splendor Wheel of Reincarnation. Saha represented the boundless world, and in the evolution of the 6 paths of reincarnation, it actually contained the various powers of the boundless world. In addition to these 2 Buddhist cultivation methods, Chu Xiu also chose a secret ancient book of Taoism, the Taishan Scripture. The Taishan Scripture was a secret ancient book of the 3 Pristines Temple. It did not have any offensive martial arts skills, but it was the simplest of the great Tao, pointing directly to the origin of heaven and earth. Taoism cultivation methods were the most gentle, and they sought a subtle balance among the rules of all things. It was just like the 2 origins in Chu Xiu's body. Therefore, after seeing the Taishan Scripture, Chu Xiu casually flipped through it, and almost without hesitation, he decided to make it one of the main cultivation methods. Chapter 13:12. Chu Xiu chose 2 Buddhist techniques and 1 Taoist technique from the Gate of Heaven. In fact, there were quite a number of demonic techniques in the Gate of Heaven, but Chu Xiu wasn't interested in any of them. Most of his demonic techniques came from Dugu Weiwei. How could he be interested in other demonic techniques? Moreover, Chu Xiu had the demonic path of creation. It was a powerful demonic technique that could lead to the great Tao. At least in terms of demonic techniques, Chu Xiu wasn't lacking. As for the techniques in the Gate of Heaven, after Wei Shuya and the others sorted them out, there were 11 of them. It should be known that they were techniques. The appearance of every technique meant that the ancestor of the technique was a powerful martial immortal. While martial immortals were capable of creating divine abilities, not every martial immortal was capable of creating divine abilities. Chu Xiu had asked Lu Sanjin before. There were only 5 or 6 techniques in the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion. The collection of the Gate of Heaven had already surpassed that of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, Chu Xiu had already flipped through those sacred arts, but he did not choose a single one. The technique that Chu Xiu had, the cross-shaped lotus seal, consumed little energy, but it had strong limitations. It specialized in suppressing evil and strange powers. The phenomenon of heaven and earth was the pinnacle of power. Chu Xiu was most familiar with it, and could change it at will. The clear sky illuminating shadow was powerful, but it consumed a shocking amount of energy as well. It had to be used cautiously, and it depended on the occasion. Now that he had learned all the techniques from weak to strong, there wasn't much meaning for Chu Xiu to waste his energy to comprehend the other techniques. For example, the fire dragon lamp that Jun Wuxian had unleashed was very powerful, but it might not be stronger than Chu Xiu's phenomenon of heaven and earth. The techniques in the Gate of Heaven were basically at the same level as Jun Wuxian's fire dragon lamp. So even if he successfully cultivated it, it wouldn't be of much use to Chu Xiu. The only thing that interested Chu Xiu was the head-piercing 7 arrows that Jun Wuxian had used on him. This divine ability was strange, vicious, and incomparably poisonous. It could be said to be very interesting. Chu Xiu had once tried to cultivate it, but he found that he couldn't fit this divine power at all. It was useless to forcefully cultivate it. Divine powers were not cultivation techniques. Even if a cultivation technique was not compatible with you, as long as you wanted to learn it, you would be able to learn the basics. However, if the divine ability was not compatible with you, then you didn't know how to use it. There was no such thing as entry or great accomplishment. However, Chu Xiu didn't care about it. It was normal for a straightforward person like him to not be compatible with the sinister and vicious magical power of the 7 nail-head arrows. Shang Tianliang and the others had also gained quite a lot. There were too many cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques in the heavenly gates. There were countless body refinement techniques of the Taoist, Buddhist, and demonic sections. Almost everyone had gained something. Therefore, the group of people from the Kunlun devil cult occupied the basilica that used to belong to the divine generals of Elysium, and began to prepare to train in seclusion. Chu Xiu was also preparing to go into seclusion for a period of time. His breakthrough to the 3rd heavenly layer of martial immortal was a bit inexplicable. He was not prepared at all. It would inevitably cause his cultivation to become unstable. So he needed to go into seclusion for a period of time to stabilize his cultivation. However, before Chu Xiu went into seclusion, Grandmaster Yuan Ji sent news that someone from the Daluotian side was looking for him. It was the Vice Palace Master of the Southern Region's Heavenly Demon Palace, Yuan Kongcheng. He seemed to be very anxious. Chu Xiu and Yuan Kongcheng had cooperated to annihilate the blissful demon palace. Now the Heavenly Demon Palace was the #1 demonic sect in the southern region. The cooperation between the two sides was quite good. So Yuan Kongcheng was probably not looking for trouble. Chu Xiu had no choice but to temporarily put aside his seclusion and return to the southern barbaric land. Then, through the formation of the southern barbaric land, he returned to the Daluotian side. Stepping into the reception hall of the Tsangnan mansion, Chu Xiu said with a smile on his face, "Palace Lord Yuan, you have graced us with your presence. I was in closed-door cultivation and was unable to welcome you in time. I hope Palace Lord Yuan will not take offense." Yuan Kongcheng said with a strange expression, "Official Chu, you can still smile? During this period of time, did you really not hear the slightest news?" Chu Xiu said in surprise, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Since the end of the Daluotian Divine Palace, Chu Xiu had focused all his energy on the lower realms. After all, after seriously injuring Jun Wuxian, Chu Xiu must use the fastest time to deal with the Gate of Heaven. Otherwise, when Jun Wuxian recovered from his injuries, this rare opportunity would be wasted. So on the Daluotian side, Chu Xiu really didn't pay any special attention. Yuan Kongcheng said in a deep voice, "Official Chu, I have heard of your performance in the Daluotian Divine Palace. It is indeed very dazzling. Using the profound principles of heaven and earth to kill Xian Jialua, who had stepped into the martial immortal realm. This kind of achievement is almost as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns in 10,000 years. In the rankings of the Daluotian Divine Palace, you are one of the 6 strongest people, on par with the geniuses of the 3 Pristines Temple, Su Guishan, and the others. You crossed the gap between heaven and man with 1 step, and entered the martial immortal realm. It can be said that your performance in the Daluotian Divine Palace is definitely the most outstanding of all the cultivators who entered the Daluotian Divine Palace. But did you not think about how many people you have offended in this line of work? You forced a disciple of the world's sword sects to cripple an arm and humiliated them. You even killed Venerable Guyu, Divine General Zhenlong, and exalted swordsman Ling Tian. You should know that it is not easy for Venerable Guyu to cultivate a successor, but you in the end killed all of them. Although my description is a little inappropriate, what you did is no different from ending their line of descendants. And in the Sanskrit temple, Xian Jialua is the new temple master of the Vishnu temple, a person with a limitless future. Originally, the Sanskrit temple planned to let him step into the 3rd heavenly layer of martial immortal realm in the Daluotian, and then after returning to the Sanskrit temple, undergo the 3 gods' empowerment. He would immediately rise by another 3rd heavenly layer and stabilize the situation in the Vishnu temple. Weren't you at the 2nd heavenly layer when you came out of the Daluotian Divine Palace? How come you are at the 3rd heavenly layer now? Forget it, let's not talk about you. The Sanskrit temple planned well, but in the end, you killed them without even giving them a chance to enter the Daluotian divine palace. How can the Sanskrit temple let it go? You should know to leave a way out. And it will be easier to meet them in the future. You have done so ruthlessly. How can the others not react? This time, I have already received the news that led by the World Sword Sects, Divine General Zhenlong Su Tianya, Venerable Gu Yufeng Baidu, and exalted swordsman Ling Tian Shengju Yuan are all coming to find trouble with you. And among them, the Sanskrit temple may also send people. Official Chu, the last time you cooperated with the demonic palace, you and I have some friendship, so I came to remind you this time. Chu Xiu slightly raised his eyebrows and cupped his hands at Yuan Kongqing, saying, Thank you for the reminder, Palace Master Yuan. I know the principle of leaving a way out, but I want to leave a way out, but they did not think of leaving a way out. Moreover, the Central Plains is a trap, so it is normal for them to die, isn't it? They were killed because they were inferior to me, but now they still have the face to find trouble with me. Haha, these so-called famous prime sovereigns are all losers. Right, it is very common for prime sovereign successors to be killed when they travel the pugilistic world. Aren't these three breaking the rules by coming to find trouble with me now? Yuan Kongqing smiled bitterly. Rules are just a tacit unspoken rule, and no one will care even if they are a little flexible. Shengju Yuan and the other two will naturally not come to find trouble with you openly, but if the World Sword Sects invite them to help, then there will be no problem. Before I came, the World Sword Sects were already discussing this matter, and I was delayed for a few days on the road, so I'm afraid they are already here. In short, Official Chu, you should be prepared for this matter. I will take my leave first. After all, I am also a member of the Southern Region sects, and it is not good for others to see me here. Yuan Kongqing left in a hurry, but what puzzled him was that there did not seem to be any fear or worry on Chu Xiu's face. One must know that he was currently being targeted by the World Sword Sects, several martial immortals, and even the Sanskrit sect. The Imperial Sky Pavilion alone could not protect him, so why did he look so fearless? Yuan Kongqing did not ask much. He was here to bring a message to Chu Xiu out of an opportunistic reason. He had only worked with Chu Xiu once, and did not have much of a relationship. As they were both from the Southern Region sects, they must have planted spies in each other's sections. The World Sword Sects discussions were not too secretive, so it was normal for Yuan Kongqing to know. Therefore, he could say or not say anything about this matter. However, Yuan Kongqing always had a feeling that the height that Chu Xiu could reach in the future might be beyond his imagination. When Chu Xiu was still in the heaven and earth elucidation state, Yuan Kongqing could not see through him. And it was even more so now. Therefore, he wanted to inform Chu Xiu and form a good relationship with him. In the future, if Chu Xiu died, he would not suffer any loss, but if Chu Xiu survived, he would owe him a favor. After Yuan Kongqing left, Lu Jianghe and Mei Qinglian walked in. Chu Xiu said in surprise, You two did not go into seclusion? Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, The Red Lotus Hellfire of the Red Lotus is enough for me to study, so I only chose 2 ordinary secret techniques that are the icing on the cake, so there is no need for me to go into seclusion. When I heard that the Daluotian is in trouble, I came to see if there is anything I can help with. Lu Jianghe nodded and said, Me too. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, It's not a big deal. It's nothing more than someone who is unwilling to lose and came looking for trouble. I have already expected this. Old Lu, come with me to High Heaven sect. Qinglian, you stay and guard the Daluotian side. While you are at it, tell the barbarians to report immediately if they see any Southern Territory cultivators coming. Chu Xiu wasn't surprised by Yuan Kongqing's words. In fact, he was already prepared for it. He had always been accustomed to speculating about others with the greatest malice. He had killed so many people in the Daluotian territory, so there was no guarantee that someone would come looking for trouble with him. As for the rule that Gu Zun could not act, Chu Xiu actually did not believe it, because among the Daluotian, there were basically no rules that could restrain martial immortal masters. It was just that Chu Xiu did not expect that this group of people would come together to find trouble with him. Chu Xiu's countermeasure was also very simple. He had spent so much effort to save Fang Yinglong last time, and it was not in vain. Now it was his high heaven sect's turn to return this favor. Chapter 13:13. The atmosphere in High Heaven Sect's High Heaven City was somewhat depressing. When Chu Xiu arrived, Elder Wu of High Heaven Sect came out to greet him. Seeing the cultivators of High Heaven Sect like this, Chu Xiu couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why do I feel that the atmosphere in your High Heaven Sect is a bit off?" Elder Wu looked at Chu Xiu curiously and said, "Xianyuan Wushuang was killed by a demonic ghost in the Exalted Divine Palace. Official Chu, you should know about this." Hearing Elder Wu's words, Chu Xiu finally realized that it was because of Xianyuan Wushuang. Chu Xiu had really forgotten about this matter. It wasn't that Chu Xiu's memory was bad, but when he killed Xianyuan Wushuang, the latter was no longer a threat in Chu Xiu's eyes. Killing him was as easy as stepping on an ant. Chu Xiu could remember Jun Wushan, who had almost killed him in the past, but he had subconsciously ignored Xianyuan Wushuang. He couldn't react for a moment. Seeing Chu Xiu's appearance, even Lu Jiang, he felt that Chu Xiu had gone too far. You killed him, but you still don't remember him. If Xianyuan Wushuang's body could be found, he would probably scratch his coffin in anger. After expressing his condolences to Elder Wu with a seemingly sincere expression, Chu Xiu went to meet Fang Yinglong and the others with Lu Jianghe. In the reception hall, Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, Linghu Xianshan, and the other martial immortals of High Heaven Sect were all present. As soon as he saw them, Chu Xiu put on a sorrowful look and said, "I've heard about Brother Xianyuan. I'm sorry for your loss. Although I had some disputes with Brother Xianyuan in the past, it can be said that no discord, no concord. I originally thought that after he became a martial immortal and took over High Heaven Sect, we could meet again, forget our enmity, and guard the Eastern Domain together. I didn't expect that he would be defeated in the Exalted Divine Palace. When I saw him for the last time, I suggested that Brother Xianyuan act with me, but Brother Xianyuan was also a proud man, and insisted on killing the demonic ghost with his own strength. I didn't expect that would be the last time we met." Chu Xiu's attitude was extremely sincere, and it didn't make him look sad, nor did it make others feel that he was being polite. It was as if he was truly sad for the death of an old friend. His acting skills had also improved after he became a martial immortal. Was it? Lu Jianghe also lowered his head behind Chu Xiu, as if he was also silently mourning. However, in reality, he just didn't want Fang Yinglong and the others to see his twisted expression. At this moment, Lu Jianghe was already roaring in his heart. There's actually such a shameless person in this world. Lu Jianghe was completely convinced. It made sense that Chu Xiu could be the sect leader, while he was only a demon exalt. At this moment, Lu Jianghe was truly convinced. There was a reason why Chu Xiu could become the sect master, while he was just a demon lord. Fang Yinglong and the others didn't doubt Chu Xiu. It made sense that Xianyuan Wushuang was killed by the demonic ghost. Fang Yinglong and the others didn't doubt Chu Xiu because the evidence was there. They saw with their own eyes that Xianyuan Wushuang died at the hands of the demonic ghost. So Fang Yinglong just sighed. Qin Baiyuan shook his head helplessly. Maybe this is fate. Of course, it's also our responsibility. Wushuang is too headstrong. We told him before that if he doesn't become a half-step martial immortal in the Central Province, he can't participate in the competition for the Exalted Divine Palace. But he didn't listen to us. Lu Sanjin of the Imperial Sky Pavilion isn't as strong as him, but he listened to Zhong Qiushui and cultivated in the Central Province. His strength also improved greatly. He just doesn't understand that only by living can he have a future. If he died, he would be nothing. By the way, Chu, why did you come here this time? Although they didn't doubt Chu Xiu, they didn't believe that Chu Xiu came all the way to High Heaven Sect just to mourn for Xianyuan Wushuang. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I came to ask for help from High Heaven Sect. Sect Master Feng once said that High Heaven Sect can do something for me. I didn't want to use this promise, but now I have no choice." With that, Chu Xiu told Fang Yinglong and the others about the people he offended in the Exalted Divine Palace, and their plan to make trouble for him. After listening, Fang Yinglong and the other two felt a toothache. Even they couldn't help but admire Chu Xiu for offending so many powerhouses in one go. How many people did he kill in the exalted divine palace? Fang Yinglong said helplessly. Chu, do you know how much trouble you've gotten yourself into? Since the sword sect of the world wants to make trouble for you, the person who will come will definitely not be ordinary. It's most likely one of the 3 sword saints, Mu Baishuang, who is in the 7th layer martial immortal realm. Of the 3 prime sovereigns, divine dragon subduing general, Su Tianya, is in the 4th layer martial immortal realm. Venerable Guyu Feng Baidu is in the 4th layer martial immortal realm. And Venerable Ling Tian Shengju Yuan is the strongest, having reached the 7th layer martial immortal realm. As for the Sanskrit sect, it's still unknown who they will send. This kind of power is enough to attack my High Heaven sect. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. That's why I came to ask High Heaven sect for help. Of course, if High Heaven sect is in trouble, I can understand. Fang Yinglong and the other 2 looked at each other helplessly. Of course they were in trouble, but could they refuse? High Heaven sect cared about their face, especially when the promise was made in front of everyone. If they went back on their word now, where would the face of a great sect with a history of 10,000 years be? With a sigh, Fang Yinglong said. Chu, you go back first. We will take action, but we need a few days to prepare. Chu Xiu nodded and left with Lu Jianghe. He wasn't worried at all that Fang Yinglong and the others would go back on their word. If they wanted to be perfunctory, they wouldn't be perfunctory here. After Chu Xiu left, Ling Huxianshan frowned and said, Are we really going to take action? But with so many martial immortals, how are we going to stop them? Fang Yinglong said helplessly, Words spoken are like water spilled. My High Heaven sect's reputation is important. It's just that when I made a promise to this Chu Xiu, I didn't expect him to cause so much trouble. But don't worry, don't forget where we are. This is the Eastern Territory. If we move the Soaring Heaven Seal to the Southern Barbaric Land, it can be used just as well, but its power will be slightly reduced. It's also good to repel them. Right now, the Southern Territory is eyeing Chu Xiu covetously. He is also a member of the Eastern Territory. With him in the Southern Barbaric Land, he is the first barrier. If he is gone, our situation will be even worse. Hearing that Fang Yinglong wanted to use the Soaring Heaven Seal, Ling Huxianshan and Qin Baiyuan were a little surprised. The Soaring Heaven Seal was the most precious treasure of their High Heaven sect. It was built 10,000 years ago when they first came to the Daluotian continent, using a part of the Eastern Territory's dragon vein. At that time, High Heaven sect was the strongest in the entire Eastern Territory, so their first ancestral founder intercepted a section of the dragon vein and refined it into this supreme treasure. However, this thing had some limitations because it was not a weapon and was huge. The further it was from the Eastern Territory's main dragon vein, the weaker its power would be. Therefore, most of the time, it was located inside High Heaven sect and rarely moved. It had only been used a few times over the past 10,000 years. That was why they were so surprised when Fang Yinglong proposed to use the Soaring Heaven Seal. However, Fang Yinglong was the sect master, and it seemed to be the only way now, so they could only nod and agree. At the same time, outside the World Sword sect, Mu Baishuang and several other martial immortals had gathered. Beside Mu Baishuang stood a cultivator with a cold face, phoenix eyes and a long beard. He had an extraordinary bearing. He was Sword Venerable Ling Xiao Shengju Yuan, who had a good relationship with the World Sword sect. There were 2 other people beside him. One of them was a brawny man wearing a bronze dragon-patterned armor. He was dragon-suppressing divine general Su Tianya. Beside him was a middle-aged man in a white scholar's robe. He was dressed like a teacher. He was Venerable Guyu Feng Baidu. When they learned that their descendants died in the Daluo Divine Palace, they were sad and angry, but more than that, they could not accept it. In fact, when their descendants were preparing to go to the Daluo Divine Palace, they were already mentally prepared. However, they could tolerate their descendants being killed by demonic ghosts due to their lack of strength, but they could not tolerate that they died in the hands of the same person, and that person was Chu Xiu. There was indeed an unspoken rule that Guzun could not intervene when a descendant of Guzun met with an accident during training. If it was just them, Even Feng Baidu and Su Tianya had planned to swallow their anger. After all, Chu Xiu was not weak, and he had the support of the eastern region's great sect, the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, when Sheng Juyuan personally came to find them and said that the World Sword sect would be participating, they immediately nodded and agreed. Seeing that Mu Baishuang still had no intention of leaving, the slightly impatient Su Tianya could not help but frown. Sword Venerable Mu, why aren't you leaving? Did the World Sword sect change its mind? Mu Baishuang said indifferently, the World Sword sect will not change its mind so easily. We are only waiting for one person. The people from the Sanskrit sect have agreed to come. Su Tianya could not help but sneer. I think we shouldn't wait any longer. I'm afraid the people from the Sanskrit sect won't be coming. The Sanskrit sect has been suppressed by the Sky Treasure Temple to begin with, and their new hallmaster was killed by Chu Xiu in the Daoyuo Divine Palace. How could they possibly be distracted enough to send someone here? As soon as he finished speaking, the void around him suddenly split open, and a twisted thread of laws surged toward him. Su Tianya's expression changed. With a raise of his hand, the surrounding void froze and turned into dragon scale-like shapes, imprisoning the threads within. However, the thread exuded an extremely powerful destructive power that could destroy everything. In an instant, the dragon scales were all torn apart, and it sliced toward his neck. Dragon roars erupted from Su Tianya's body as he tried to take it head-on. However, beside him, Feng Baidu's expression changed drastically. He formed a seal with his hands, and a white moonlight enveloped Su Tianya, immediately moving him dozens of feet away. The thread with the destructive power brushed past Su Tianya and easily broke through his dragon-shaped energy, leaving a bloody mark on his face. The pitch-black world-destroying fire bloomed, and a figure walked out of it. It turned out to be a tall and thin young man with eyes burning with world-destroying fire. He had a charming and enchanting appearance. That's right, he was charming and enchanting, and it was hard to tell whether he was a man or a woman. His voice was extremely androgynous, and it was impossible to tell whether he was a man or a woman. Su Tianya, if you dare to spout nonsense and slander the Sanskrit sect again, I will send you to accompany that unlucky disciple of yours. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.